a few seconds. We'll let more people go ahead and log in. So give us just a few more minutes and we'll get started. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how to improve email deliverability, tactics for handling complaints and boosting reputation, sponsored by ReturnPath. My name is Justin Bridigan. I'm with Marketing Sherpa, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. Now we do have some housekeeping information and some introductions I'd like to make before we begin today's presentation. We have two great presenters that are with us here today. The first is Adam Sutton. He's a senior reporter at Marketing Sherpa, and he regularly contributes articles to the email marketing and inbound marketing newsletters, as well as to the Marketing Sherpa and Marketing Experiments blogs. Adam is going to be speaking at our new Email Marketing Leap certification workshop coming to Boston in May. So welcome, Adam. We're glad to have you with us. Tom Sather is an email deliverability consultant for ReturnPath, where he works with top brand clients like eBay, MySpace, IBM, and Twitter. Now, Tom's previous experience includes stints with email service provider Experian, and he works on abuse desk for AOL, Bell South, AT&T. Now, Tommy uses his knowledge of these ISPs to advise marketers on how to get their email delivered to the inbox and generate the highest possible response. These are some great presenters. We're excited to have them here with us today, so I encourage you to pay attention to what they have to say. Now, what we'd like to do is encourage you to participate and join the conversation with us. We are on Twitter. Our hashtag is SherpaWebinar, so feel free to ask some questions. And don't forget, you do have the GoToWebinar question box feature that you can use. Now, do keep in mind that we will have about 10 minutes of Q&A after the presentation has concluded, and we look forward to getting back and forth with you. Now, also, I get this question a lot on these webinars. The presentation will be recorded today and also sent to you on Monday in a follow-up email. So you will be able to do that. And also, don't forget, you can also contact each one of us that are on the webinar and ask us any questions further with any type of the discussion that you may have. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Adam to begin our part of the presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Justin. Hello, everyone. I am first going to take everyone through some trends in email deliverability, and I'm going to do that first with two charts. We'll give you also a brief view of today's agenda. All right, current trends in deliverability. This first chart is going to address metrics. Now, overall, there is a slight improvement in what marketers are seeing in relation to deliverability. Slightly more marketers are reporting improvements compared to marketers reporting declines. And when you look at this chart, you'll notice the first three metrics listed on the left there, metrics related to bounces, missing, and inbox placement, are all showing more improvements than declines. And that is signaling that marketers are having an easier time getting emails delivered. More marketers are having an easier time with that. But as you look at the bottom three metrics here, related to junk folder placement, email opens, and email clicks, the gap is much more narrow. More marketers are reporting problems with their metrics in this area compared to the marketers reporting improvement. And this signals that there are challenges waiting for emails when they arrive. So having an email reach a subscriber is just part of the deliverability equation. The email can at that point be placed in the junk folder, and it might not be acted on, which are all related to deliverability. So marketers are having more challenges after having their messages arrive. Moving on to our next chart. This is one of Marketing Sherpa's bubble charts, and I'm very fond of these. You'll see on the x-axis here that each of these deliverability tactics are gauged by their degree of difficulty. On the y-axis, you can see that each tactic is gauged on its level of effectiveness, and the size of each bubble indicates the popularity of the tactic, the percentage of email marketers who are using them. Now you'll notice right away that the biggest bubble is for removing inactive subscribers. According to our benchmark guide, about 70% of email marketers are doing this. You won't see that on this slide, but that is from our benchmark guide. And you'll also see that this tactic is almost tied for second with the most, this tactic is tied for second for being the most effective tactic. Just to its left and above it is the most effective tactic, which is using a dedicated IP address. Now, email services such as Yahoo Mail and Gmail, they track reputation by IP address. And depending on the platform you use, you either have a shared IP address or a dedicated IP address. Shared means that you share your IP with other companies who also send from that IP address, which means you also share your reputation with those companies that use that IP address. And some marketers are able to get their own IP address, which is the dedicated IP address, this tactic, which means they control their reputation more directly because they are the only company sending from that IP. And the email service providers, ISPs, Yahoo Mail, Gmail, are only monitoring their reputation based on their actions, not the actions of others. Now you'll notice that this tactic, the size of the bubble is relatively small compared to some of the other tactics here. That's because dedicated IPs aren't available to everyone. They're typically available on more high-end email platforms, and marketers who are using a more cost-effective solution, something that might be a little cheaper, might have to use a shared IP. So not everyone is using that tactic because not everyone has it available. The last thing I want to mention about this slide is that you'll see some of the other tactics here have varying degrees of difficulty and effectiveness. But I wanted to note from other marketing Sherpa data that advanced email marketers are twice as likely to use these tactics. They are dedicated IP address, using delivery monitoring solution, and using deliverability consultants. Based on some of our research and a lot of segmentation we've done, our researchers have found that advanced email marketers are more likely to use those. All right, so now I would like to present two companies doing some work on email deliverability. This first company is called Zozy, and Zozy is a deals website for activities in local regions, and well over half of the company's transactions are generated through email, and this makes email very important and therefore delivery very important. A sale cannot be generated if the email does not arrive. And also, delivery is important for Zozy's brand. Subscribers are expecting to receive Zozy's emails, and when an email fails to deliver and reach a subscriber, that's almost like a broken promise, which reflects negatively on the brand. I just want to mention a quote also from Ryan Morris, who I interviewed for some of this content. He is Zozy's director of content, and he told me that, quote, his company takes this so seriously that if we see anything that is not exactly 100% deliverability, then we are going to take action. We will research whether it was something we did or something that was different about that particular mail. So they need to maintain 100%. And now we're going to go through some of the tactics that they use to achieve that. Okay, the first tactic they use to establish a proactive attitude. Essentially, they are aware of deliverability is important, and they want to get out in front of it before it gets in front of them. Two ways they kind of manage deliverability before launching a campaign are listed in front of you here. The first is to test emails with a seed list. Now, a seed list is a list of accounts the team has on major email services or ISPs such as Yahoo Mail, Gmail, Hotmail, and AOL. They set up regular email accounts at these companies, keep them on the list, and what they'll do is they'll send test campaigns to these addresses to monitor how the emails are placed, how the emails, if the emails are delivered, how the emails look when they arrive. They do this just to ensure that when they launch a campaign, there aren't going to be any unexpected reactions from the email services. The second thing they do is they also scan emails with the spam filter. I'm sure many of you listening are familiar with spam filters. They're often integrated into the email platforms you use, and these services provide a score about whether a message could be marked as spam, and a high score will indicate that maybe you should look at that message, try a few changes to make it, to lower that score and make it appear less spammy. All right, moving on to tactic number two. The second thing Zosie does is they set expectations very clearly. Now, when a subscriber signs up for a newsletter, they're expecting a certain type of content. And as you can see from Mr. Morris's quote here, if you deviate from that expectation, what they're expecting to receive, subscribers can react very poorly. They can not interact with the messages they receive because it's not what they expected. They can click junk or spam in their email clients to complain, or they can outright unsubscribe. So Zosie's newsletter only sends information on deals on activities in local regions. That's it. And it starts setting that expectation for that content right from its homepage. You can see a screenshot of the homepage here, and it says very clearly in bold type, deals on unique activities. See images of activities and prices for them. The marketers at this company continue to set these expectations at the email sign-up form. You can see a picture of that here. And this sign-up form says very clearly, activities, discounts, 90% off, unique experiences, activities near you. I mean, they're just hammering away at the central message. They deliver deals on unique activities in local regions. And that's exactly what you'll get from signing up. And they have a very simple form you can see here. The third way they continue to set expectations is that they reinforce them in their welcome message. So what you see here is a screenshot of the first message that a subscriber will receive after signing up from Zosie's newsletter. They get this immediately. It shows the colors and format of the emails they can expect to receive. It illustrates to them the from address that Zosie will be sending from so they can know what to look for. And it again reinforces the content. You can see the images here of activities. It says what you get deals on, and it lists the types of activities here. So subscribers know exactly what to look for, and as long as Zosie continues to fulfill its promise, then subscribers should be happy because they've indicated they want this. So moving on to the third tactic Zosie uses to maintain deliverability, they work from a proven template. Now, when I conducted this interview, Morris mentioned that Zosie had used this template for many months. It had gone through many sends, and it had been tweaked and perfected over time. The marketers were very comfortable using this message, using this email and this template. And he said, working from that template, quote, that 90% of the battle had been won. Very little could negatively impact us because we know that this particular template is time-tested. It draws very few spam complaints and unsubscribes. Now, if performance metrics had gone up or down for a particular mailing, or if there were more bounces or deliverability issues with a particular mailing, the team could almost immediately identify the issue because they were so comfortable with this template and they were so confident in it that any problems were only caused by changes in what they were doing. When they were trying something new, that's really the only time a problem would come up, which made these problems very easy to identify for them. All right, moving on to tactic number 4. Zosie always monitors performance metrics related to email, opens, clicks, as you're all very familiar with. And the deliverability and reputation metrics they monitor, some of them are listed on the screen in front of you, they consistently are focused on watching these metrics and making sure everything is fine. And Mr. Morris told me in the interview that the metrics for his company and in his industry are pretty consistent, which again makes problems easy to identify. Big drops or big jumps are rare. They don't happen without a reason. And whether they see a big improvement or a big decline, they immediately stop to figure out what happened, what caused it, and what they can learn from it. Okay, the fifth tactic they use is to make sure they have a clean list. And I'm going to go through 2 ways they make sure their list is healthy. The first is that they remove bounce emails. Now, there are 2 types of bounce emails. The first is, you can see them listed in front of you. The first are hard bounces, and these are messages that have permanently failed to deliver. And they're often caused by sending a message to an invalid email address. There are other reasons, but that's a popular one. Also, there are soft bounces, and these are messages that have temporarily failed to deliver. They might be delivered later. The subscriber's inbox could be full, or their server could be down. Now, Zosie waits for 5 consecutive bounces before removing a subscriber's address from their database. You might find something works different for your company. This is what they do, a hard bounce. If it's an invalid email address, you might not need to wait 5 times to rediscover 5 times that it's an invalid email address. Maybe you want to remove it right away. You definitely want to test and research what's best for your situation, but this is what works for them. The second thing they do for a clean list is to remove complainers. Anyone who marks an email as junk or spam is immediately removed from Zosie's list. You're going to hear a lot more about how to deal with complaints and what you can do about them in the second half of our presentation. Isn't that right, Tom? You with us?
Yes. Yeah, so I think, really the key here is to, remove complaints, sign up for all the feedback loops, and that'll help in in the long run. I think, the great thing about all these tactics that Zosie used, they're, kind of like little short wins that they help to improve their deliverability. They didn't have to invest a lot of, time and money in getting there. So I think that's, that's great. And we're actually going to go into a lot more detail about the feedback loops and other tactics as well.
Great. Yeah, Tom has some great content coming up. Please stay tuned. The last tactic that Zosie used was to plan for the future. They knew that deliverability would be a central challenge going forward, so they wanted to make sure that they were continuing to help their situation. 2 ways they did that. The first is they planned to launch free engagement campaigns. These are email campaigns that are sent targeting inactive subscribers, and they are trying to encourage subscribers to become active again, become interested in opening the emails again and clicking on them and converting. And the second thing they do, we touched on before, is that Zosie wants to establish a dedicated IP address. At the time of the interview, they were sending from a shared IP address, and they want to have more control over their reputation. And I just wanted to mention a quote from my favorite email marketer, George Washington. And he also knew the importance of maintaining a good reputation. He said, "To associate with men of good quality if you esteem your own reputation, or it's better to be alone than in bad company." Good old George probably had a dedicated IP address.
Definitely, and I just want to add too, with the dedicated IPs, there's a lot of questions about, how do I know if I'm ready for a dedicated IP? If I'm small volume, should I send from a dedicated IP? What are kind of the requirements to get a dedicated IP address? And I think, by all means, like, Adam, like you were talking about before, if you're a small mailer, if you have just really low volumes, then you probably want to get a dedicated IP. And the reason why is because the ISPs are measuring volume. They're looking at the volume and establishing your reputation, kind of based on that. So obviously, if you're a big brand and you're sending out millions of messages, a day or a week, you want to get a dedicated IP address. Kind of the dividing line between maybe a shared and a dedicated IP, I would say it's about 50,000. So one of the questions we got from a panelist is, or excuse me, from one of the audience members is, how about, I heard that 300,000 messages is the number that we should send from, or per month. That could be. It just kind of depends on your volume per day. So about 10,000 emails per day. That's I think is a pretty good guideline of you want to use a shared IP address if you're less than 10,000 per day. If you're more than that, you probably want your own dedicated IP because you have enough sending volume at that point to establish your own reputation on that.
All right, great. Thanks, Tom. Those are some great guidelines. I'm just going to briefly present the work from one more company now. And before I do, I just want to mention that good deliverability really starts with address acquisition, and the tactics your company uses to build its database will really directly impact your deliverability later on. The higher quality of names you get in subscribers will lead to better results later. So this company is called Olifescript, and they did work for several years to find and fix bad email addresses in their database. Olifescript is a women's health website and has more than 5 million readers to its 6 newsletters. And that is a very large audience, and which makes email very important to Olifescript, and therefore deliverability is also important. I just want to mention that removing bad addresses from a database is a really, really good idea, and it's important to not send emails to invalid addresses because the internet service providers, the ISPs, the email companies, again, Gmail, Yahoo Mail, etc., really mark down a reputation of a company if it sends a high volume of emails to invalid addresses. Essentially, they don't like getting email sent to addresses that aren't valid. They think it represents poor practices. It's more likely the habit of a spammer, and it will harm your reputation to do that. So Olifescript was aware of this and wanted to start going through its database and removing these types of addresses, and also setting up practices to ensure that these addresses never entered the database in the first place. And what I'm going to do is go through 4 types of bad email addresses that they identified. Now, the first type are called role accounts. Now, role accounts are used for a specific reason in a company. A company creates an email address and uses it for a very specific role. It's often these addresses are often used by multiple people in the company. An example of one might be an email address set up just to receive questions from an audience, or to receive press releases from companies, or to maintain a website. These aren't personal emails that people use to sign up for newsletters. They have a specific role in a company. Now, these are bad addresses for 2 reasons. Number one is that these addresses are publicly available online. They're often published on websites, and spammers will identify these and add them to the list. It's another email address on a list for a spammer. They're not really interested if the person is relevant to their messages. They just want more names. So they scour the web and find any addresses they can, and they often come across role accounts. Now, the ISPs are aware of this trend and aware that spammers do this, so it can harm your reputation to send a high number of emails to role accounts. That is something that the ISPs associate with a spammer, and you don't want to be associated with them. And lastly, very briefly about role accounts. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and 2, you kind of want to avoid, sending to the role accounts of, the postmaster at the ISPs. A lot of times I see people, mailing like postmaster at AOL.com, and that's a surefire way to get yourself blocked.
Absolutely. And one last thing about role accounts is, as I mentioned, they're often used by multiple people. And even if one of those people used that account to sign up for your newsletter, there are probably plenty of other people who use that account who aren't interested in your newsletter, which kind of makes your newsletter susceptible to being marked by spam or deleted by those people. So role accounts are bad. Second type of bad email address are syntax errors and typos. These are genuine mistakes that people make when they're trying to give you their email address. And as you can see from the examples on the screen here, there are many different ways to make a typo. And Jack Hogan, the CTO and co-founder of Olifescript, presented this information at the Marketing Sherpa Email Summit in Las Vegas recently. And he noted how pervasive this problem could be with this quote here. He said that he saw 500 different ways Yahoo.com alone was entered into his company's database. So typos can become a big issue. Moving on to the bad address number 3. These are bogus email addresses. And as our friends Bill and Ted would tell us, bogus addresses are fake. They are made up by people who do not want to provide a personal email address. Essentially, they're required to provide some address, but they don't want to. So they make something up, like the examples you see in front of you. And one way to get a high number of fake addresses into your database is to require people to submit an email address when they want to complete a task that is completely unrelated. For example, if you have a contest and you require people to give you an email address to enter the contest, and the contest really doesn't have anything to do with your newsletter, there's a good chance people are just going to make up email addresses and give them to you and put them in your database. And, again, this is bad if you email these addresses, because ISPs do not like to see a high volume of emails sent to fake addresses. It will hurt your reputation and also hurt your deliverability. All right, moving on to the last type of bad email address that Olifescript identified are spam traps. Now, spam trap addresses are created by companies to collect spam and track spammers. Basically, a company will create an email address and publish it online and wait for spammers to find it. They will lure spammers in with them. And they don't use these addresses for anything other than tracking spam. So any incoming email to these addresses is inherently unsolicited. It's therefore spam and can be used to really harm the sender's reputation among ISPs. Now, as I mentioned, having a spam trap on your list can really hurt your reputation. And there's really you shouldn't get one normally, but there are two ways that it's a possibility for you to get them on your list. One is that you could have poor sources. Maybe you work with a partner who provides a list of email addresses, and they don't have the most honest of practices when acquiring those addresses. And some of the addresses they are handing over to you might be spam traps, and that can hurt your reputation if you email them. Excuse me. Sorry. The second way is that someone can try to poison your list. You might have a upset customer or a disgruntled employee who has identified spam traps online and has used them to put them on your list to harm your company. So it is possible for them to end up on your list, and you want to keep an eye out for them.
Yeah, and I want to add too here, Adam, that there is, ISPs actually will recycle addresses too. So, let's say I own the, email address tom@hotmail.com, and I abandon it because I move over to a different webmail provider. After about 12 months or so, the ISPs, if I do abandon it, they'll return an unknown user code. So, if you are processing or bounces, those should be removed. But if you're not, chances are that address may actually be converted into a spam trap. So the ISPs really are, like Adam said, looking at the the quality of your list. How do you handle your bounces? How are you acquiring people? So if you do get a spam trap on your address, or excuse me, on your database, it really looks poorly on you because people are the ISPs are saying, look, this sender isn't collecting addresses in a maybe even a legal way, or they're not removing unknown users or doing win-back studies. So it does reflect poorly, and it's something that all senders should pay attention to.
Absolutely. All right. I just want to wrap up my part of the presentation here with what Olifescript saw over the course of 2 years. So they went through this process for about 2 years and checked about 26 million email addresses. And just to give you some idea of how many addresses could be invalid, found that about 1.33% of them were invalid. In their case, that was about 340,000 bad addresses that they kept off their list, and that each one of those addresses was an address that Olifescript was not emailing to, and that would not be used to harm Olifescript's reputation. And I think that completes my portion of today's discussion. I'd like to hand it back to Tom.
Great, thanks, Adam. Really informative, and I loved the case studies of Zozy. Like I mentioned, it really they did little things to help boost their deliverability. So it doesn't require a huge investment. You can do little things like signing up for feedback loops, making sure that you're having the correct permission and disclosure, and we'll go into that in more detail in a bit. But the key is you don't have to spend a lot of money. It's not like the rest of marketing where you may have to spend a lot on marketing automation, spend a lot on your ESP. With deliverability, just with little wins, you can actually achieve great results. So I want to do a kind of a poll right now, or excuse me, in just a little bit, and we're going to ask you kind of about your complaints here. So so now we're going to talk about, your reputation. So obviously Zozy understood that the reputation really held the key to their deliverability. So they looked at everything from, bounced emails to the unknown users, making sure that they don't have a high unknown user rate. Most ISPs want to keep that under about 10%. Also, they are looking at list hygiene. Unknown users is part of list hygiene, but the other half that Adam just mentioned were spam traps. So if you get too many of those, that can negatively impact you as well. A lot of the blacklists, probably, some of you out there may be aware of some of them. The biggest one is probably Spam House. They also use spam traps out there. So they, like Adam was saying, they kind of sprinkle email addresses out there on different websites to see who's scraping it and to kind of negatively ding people. And you can also acquire those through poor sources. So a lot of people buy email addresses from people that buy email addresses and so forth and so on, and that can actually catch up with you. So, and really, the biggest part of reputation, I think, are complaints. And complaints are probably the biggest driver for, getting sent to, the junk folder or the bulk folder or the spam folder, or to have your emails blocked. A lot throughout this presentation we talk about placement rates, and I want to kind of just define that, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. So we talk about deliverability or delivery. That just means messages that were accepted by the ISP or the webmail providers. It doesn't really indicate whether or not your email landed in the spam folder or the inbox, and that's where we come up with the placement rate. So for inbox placement rates, something that everyone wants to achieve, especially like Adam presented with Zosie, is that you want to get 100% inbox placement rate. And to really help with that, you really need to be in charge of your complaints. And they're also kind of the most difficult to get a hold of, just because now, like we talked about with Zosie, it was very mechanical, a lot of little things. The complaints has to do with the psychology of the the subscriber. So now you have to get into the to the head of your subscribers and say, why are these people complaining about my email? And the effect, like I mentioned, will be low inbox placement rates if you do have a high complaint. So the ISPs are going to be either sidelining your emails to the spam folder, or they could be blocking it. So your emails may never even reach the spam folder. So there's no chance of subscribers interacting with that, which means that you're going to have either a low or zero response rate on your email. And that means that your email program isn't making any money. You're not making a return on investment anymore. So it's just money wasted at that point.
Hey, Tom, just want to jump in here real quick. Did you want to
Sure.
go ahead and have me launch that poll for you?
Yeah, if you could launch that poll for me. I kind of want to just kind of get a pulse of everybody of of your complaint rates for the last campaign you deployed. So do you guys know what that is? Do you guys track that? If you do, click on yes. Maybe not offhand, but we track that data. Or no, we don't monitor email deliverability at all. Or maybe you don't have any idea. So I know, like here at ReturnPath, how we handle our email. We're signing up for all feedback loops. When we send out our marketing newsletters, we're monitoring that. We do a lot of things like analyzing our complaints to see who may be complaining. Other things that you want to consider, a lot of the feedback loop programs are just available for commercial webmail providers, or kind of second tier ESPs, or excuse me, ISPs. If you're mainly a B2C center, or B2B center, it can be a little bit more difficult, but we'll kind of talk about how you can go about that in just a little bit.
Okay, I don't know if you can see the results here, Tom. I want to just go ahead and give you, with about close to 60% voted, it looks like we have about 39% say not offhand, but we have the data, followed by 33% yes I do, and 23% I don't know. So that's based upon the poll results.
Yeah, that's great. So, it's great to see that 33% of you guys are know what your complaint rates are for your last campaign. I imagine maybe the other 39% who tracks that but doesn't know what the last campaign had, maybe just haven't checked their metrics yet this morning. And it looks like most people are on top of that. They're at least collecting complaints, but may not know as much about them as possible. So let's kind of go over about let's talk about that psychology, about how subscribers complain about your email, and then why they complain about your email. So the first one is through through the webmail interface. So the subscriber will either hit the junk or spam button. If you guys have a Gmail or a Yahoo account, you can just imagine the report spam button, or Hotmail's report junk. So if they receive that email from you and they don't maybe know who it is, or maybe they just want to be removed from it, they may click on that report spam button. And there's two examples here of what they look like. So we have the, on top there is the report junk button for Windows Live Hotmail. At the bottom we have the report spam button within the email interface. And the other way that they do it is they may actually send the subscriber may actually send a message to the postmaster group at the ISP. This is actually the absolute worst way that subscribers can report a complaint, and you don't want them to do that. That means that they have probably tried to unsubscribe, they've maybe tried to hit the report spam, they've probably tried every avenue possible, but they couldn't get removed. So now your message is being front and center of the postmaster group at the ISP, and you know what? You've interrupted their day. They're probably in a bad mood because they're getting, thousands of calls from, other senders and, their own users. So what are they going to do? They're probably going to block you. So try to avoid that at all possible. And the other way is subscribers may send a, complaint to a filtering company or, a blacklisting company like, CloudMark or SpamCop. A lot of these companies, too, will have tools within their interface where they can report that. This is how, I was talking about B2B complaints before. This is how B2B complaints would be measured. So those that are using like Outlook and things like that. And some B2B companies will have their own feedback loops too, but mostly they're going to be using an application much like this. And the other way, and this is an interesting way to do it, that Windows Live Hotmail does it, is through what they call their Windows Live Sender Reputation Data Group. So these are a group of volunteers that kind of basically validate whether the spam filtering is working at Hotmail or not. So if you think about it, your email gets delivered, to the spam folder. How do we know, how does Hotmail then say, oh, this is a false positive, or not? How do they make sure that it's working? Well, they use these group of volunteers then to say, okay, this email landed in the spam folder. Will you take the time and just say whether or not our spam folders are working or not? And that's basically all it is. It's a yes or no question. And if it says yes, it landed in the spam folder and we think that's correct, well, you know what, it's going to probably stay in there. And they tally that basically on a scale of 50% or more. So 50% or more means if it lands in the inbox and over 50% say, yep, that's correct, it'll probably stay within the inbox. And vice versa. If they report it, if they think it's spam and it landed in the inbox, your messages may be delivered to the spam folder. It's different than regular complaints. A lot of you are familiar with the feedback loops. When the subscriber hits that report spam button, you, the marketer, actually receives a copy of that message. In this case, you don't. So this is all behind the scenes, and these volunteers are kind of cherry-picked by Hotmail. There's about maybe 500,000 within North America, and I think, and this number has probably changed, but there is probably about 2 million around the globe voting on these types of messages. So again, somewhat scary, but they need that lack of transparency. So the spammers out there are trying to game that system. So now, I want to kind of show you guys some benchmarks on complaints by industry, because a lot of people, at Return Path, ask me like, I'm a retailer, what's, my average complaint rate, or, something like that. So you can see from this group, the complaint rates by, by industry or by vertical differ greatly. So retail has the highest complaint rate. But, and also a chart that I don't have on here is they actually have the best deliverability. And so that doesn't really, kind of match up, right? But it does. Retailers are probably more sophisticated at deliverability, like we saw with Zosie, right? They're monitoring their complaints. They're signed up for feedback loops. Also, they're probably more at risk for complaints just because, I may not be in the market all the time for emails, but retailers do have to send emails probably on, a daily or, a weekly basis. So that makes sense. Also, you can see some of the lower complaint rates are, with banking and also online staffing and recruitment services and education. That makes sense too, right? Just because, if I'm receiving email from my bank, it's probably transactional in nature. Same thing with online staffing. If I'm looking for a job, I want to receive those emails. So I want to make sure that they do land in my inbox. If they do go to the spam folder, I'm probably voting them out. So I'm probably not going to complain about those, and those have the, the best complaints, or the best complaint rate. So let's talk about, kind of the top 5 reasons that subscribers are complaining about email. So the first one, and Adam touched on this with Zosie as well, is, using the proper permission and disclosure at the, point of email collection, meaning at the point of sign up. So you basically want to, tell them the type of emails that they're going to be receiving. I would even go as far as to say, tell them the frequency of the emails, because if you're sending out a daily email, you want to make sure that the subscriber knows that, so they're not surprised then that they're receiving a high volume of emails. Especially in, Zosie's case, they were a daily deal email site, so they want to make sure that they are setting that expectation so the subscriber can expect it. Also, using the proper permission. That can come in a variety of different ways. A lot of you have probably heard of like double opt-in. That means that's probably the highest level of permission possible. That's good because, obviously the subscriber then will receive a confirmation email within their inbox that they have to click through in order before they start to receive further emails from you. And that's good because, obviously if a subscriber really wants your email, they're going to go into their inbox and click through on it. And those that maybe have signed up and maybe changed their mind, they won't do that, so they're never going to receive it. So what does that mean? They're not going to complain about your emails coming forward. So that's great. However, double opt-in is, again, it's probably the harshest to marketers because you're going to have lower list growth. So you could do things like having a checkbox. I always recommend maybe doing something unchecked. A lot of marketers may have it even, a pre-checked box. But that's what we mean by using the proper permission. And it may, differ by the, by the type of, business you are. So I just recommend testing that out. Double opt-in may be great for one business, but, it may actually destroy another one. So test it around, see what you have, available to you, what has the, best list growth, what has the lower complaints, and then stick with that. And the, excuse me, and the second, and also I just want to show you an example here of Bass Pro Shops because I love this example because they only offer, or they only require 3 fields here that you have to sign up for. One, the email address. They require your first name, obviously, to personalize it, and then they also ask for your zip code, and that's just to give you personalized emails based on the location and the stores in your area. Additionally, they even go further, so they tell you the types of emails that you'd like to receive, so they give you that level of permission. So if you just want to receive the standard email, you can do that, or you can get stuff on the retail stores around your zip code. Also, maybe you're just into boating, so you just want to receive emails on boating, you can select that here. Or if you just want to receive emails on email surveys. The other great thing about this is that this is all, they have it all unchecked. The only thing that's pre-checked is just to receive the standard email because obviously you're signing up, you need to receive one or the other, but and that's the reason they do that. So this is a great example of allowing your subscribers to choose the types of message that they want to receive. And the next one here is, just sending relevant emails, relevant messages to your subscribers. And, deliverability consultants and, marketing people, are, probably shout this on the top of the mountain, a lot. But keep in mind, it's pretty difficult, to do that. We would love, I think, to send a personalized, a message different for each of our subscribers based on their interests and things like that. But a lot of times we're, maybe only have click-throughs and opens and things like that. But make sure that you know your audience, or excuse me, your subscribers well, right? Because if you know that, you have a great response to, certain sales, maybe you want to, focus on that, or, start segmenting your subscribers based on, the types of emails that they're more receptive to. And those are some little things you can do. Obviously, if you have the time and money, you can even go further. A good example, if that would be like Amazon, right? If you do like a search on Amazon, they're sending you the next day, personalized emails based on your search results. And I also just want to show, again, here's another example from Bass Pro Shops. So, after signing up and selecting some of their preferences, they sent a customized message to us. So, in our test, we just selected stuff for hunting, and then we received a personalized email from Bass Pro Shops showing us new hunting gear, and then also showing us, kind of what's the sales online, also things that are in stores really cater to the interest that that we put in the email. So we thought this was great. They obviously have different templates based on the message, and they include that into the message. Another one, and this is again another really easy win, is to make sure that the from address is recognizable. Too often I see with senders that they actually use a from address that is maybe personalized. So if you think about, for some reason, like survey companies like to use a personal email address. So it may be like Jennifer at surveycompany.com. Reason they do this is because they think it's maybe a one-to-one interaction. They're more likely to open that. But the key is when they do open that email, they may feel a little bit duped, right? Because they think, well, I thought this was something else. I thought it was actually a personal email, and they may be more likely to report it as spam. The other thing, too, is if they don't recognize your email address when they're scanning the inbox, right, because subscribers, studies done on it, only really spend a few seconds at a time in the inbox. So they're looking at, two things. They're looking at the from address as well as the subject line. So when they're first scanning the from address, they don't recognize that. They're probably just going to click on the box next to it and either hit the delete button, which is probably just as bad, right? Because they're not seeing your email and you don't get a response on it. It also affects engagement rates, and then also they may just report it as spam too. And those are kind of the common ways to do that. So like with the example with Zosie that Adam showed, they showed Zosie as the from address. So it was clear who they were. And then also, in this example, we have the Museum of Fine Arts from Boston. So if you do have to change your email address, in the case like them, they did send out an email campaign to their subscribers letting them know that, hey, you may notice that the from address is going to change, and here's what it's going to be. This serves two purposes. One, so when it does change, they don't, subscribers don't freak out and think it's something else and report it as spam, or even report it as phishing, because that phishing attacks are occurring more frequently now, especially with brands like this. And then additionally, because a lot of subscribers are adding these addresses, to the address book, which acts kind of like a personal whitelisting, turns images on by default, and also makes sure that your inbox, or excuse me, your emails are placed in the inbox. They can update that. So when you do change, you're probably going to run into some deliverability issues. So you want to kind of sidestep that by notifying them of any email address changes. And the fourth one is really to make sure that you have the optimum frequency for your emails. A lot of times, you hear maybe your deliverability expert telling you your frequency is too high, but it can actually be too low sometimes. So if you only send out maybe once every 6 months, that's definitely not enough, because you think about it, who's going to remember that they signed up for that email message? So make sure that I recommend at least touching all your subscribers in your database at least probably once a quarter, if not even once a month, just so they keep you front and center in their mind. They know who you are, and they don't report your email as spam if they don't recognize you. And then additionally too, you don't want to send too much email. If you're sending, I know some senders send out stuff like 3 times a day. That's maybe too much, but really look at your complaint rates, kind of test it and measure it and change as you go along. If you do want to change your permission too, in this example from Blue Nile, ask permission before you do that. So if your subscribers are used to receiving maybe a biweekly email, and you start to ramp up your frequency, notify your subscribers, make sure that they're aware of that. In this case, Blue Nile did that for the Christmas season. They notified them, hey, subscribers, you're going to probably be seeing a lot more email from us. So, if it gets too much, you can actually opt down, meaning you can change your frequency to something lower. So, love that example, and maybe you want to keep that in mind. Fifth one is really important too. So, making sure that it's easy to get off the list if they want to. So, a good example of that would be to have a one-click unsubscribe. What I recommend not doing, and this is also a violation of canned spam, is don't require a login and password to a sign-up page. Make sure that when they do click on the unsubscribe link within your email, it pops up the unsubscribe page already with their email address probably populated in there, and all they have to do is verify if they want to be removed from that particular newsletter or all of your newsletters. And there's a variety of ways to do that. In this case, for Travelocity, they made it really easy. When you clicked on that unsubscribe link, it already populated the first name and email address, and you could just click submit and be unsubscribed from all of their emails. And the great thing, too, is that they did show a confirmation page saying, hey, you know what, you've been removed from everything. They also set the expectations appropriately of when the address would be removed. So, for example, if you don't have any control of your system and you know that they may be receiving emails over the next 3 business days, make sure you tell them that. Again, set the expectations so they're not surprised if they receive any future emails, because you know what? They will complain, I guarantee it. So just want to spend the last few minutes talking about how to manage your complaint rates. So one we talked about is the feedback loop. So obviously all the major ISPs and webmail providers do offer feedback loops. There are a lot out there. Sign up for them so you can receive a copy of those messages then every time a subscriber reports your email as spam. And then once you start collecting those, you probably want to do a complaint analysis on a regular basis. Here's an example from a major retailer of a complaint analysis that I did. And you can see where the complaints are really high in the beginning, right? That to me indicates that they aren't setting expectations correctly at the beginning of the relationship. So they may say something like, hey, you're going to get emails from us, but maybe they didn't know they were getting daily emails. Maybe they didn't know the types of emails, so when they got them, they were surprised and they clicked on spam. Additionally, we saw a spike, after a year. This to me indicates, in this case, it was due to subscriber fatigue. So people were just tired of receiving emails. It was the same frequency. They weren't tailored to the subscriber, so they reported spam. Additionally, and then we saw, again, around the 532-day range, complaints started to increase again. When we looked at the data, we also saw that frequency increased. They were testing frequency during that time frame, which caused an increase in complaints. And then complaints trailed down as the subscribers got older as well, at least their subscription anyway. And then you also, like Zosie, in tactic number 4 that Adam showed, always monitor your reputation. So you always want to monitor your complaints, your unknown users, how many messages are being filtered, how many of your messages are being rejected by the ISPs, so you can act on it and then take the appropriate steps to improve your reputation, which also improves your deliverability and, again, your response rate. An example of this is True.com. They actually increased their paid subscriptions by 40%, which is phenomenal. What they did was they performed a complaint analysis, so they found out at what point of the relationship are people complaining. They also reduced their sending frequency based off of the findings from the complaint analysis. So rather than sending multiple ones per day, they offered like a digest version or a roll-up version, and they reduced the frequency overall. They also removed those inactives from the past 6 months. So those that weren't responding anymore, they're more likely to complain or turn into spam traps. So they said, not great to have those on our file, so they just removed them. And they also made their unsubscribing link more prominent. So those users would say, you know what, it's easier to unsubscribe. My unsubscribe link is now at the top of the page, so I'm just going to click on that versus the report spam button. And another great example is Twitter. So we did some project work with Twitter back when they were just beginning. Some of the things that they weren't doing, they weren't signed up for any feedback loops. So anytime the subscriber complained about them, it just got worse. And they were still being sent emails, so more likely they were able to complain again. They also added a global unsubscribe. They would also send out like marketing emails, new, follower notifications, things like that, and you would have to unsubscribe from each of those individually. Now they just added a global unsubscribe to, remove users from all types of messages, which helped, obviously reduce complaints overall. They also added a list unsubscribe header. This is a unique feature that you can add an unsubscribe link that appears within like the Hotmail interface and CloudMark and Gmail as well. And then also they authenticated their emails. There's 2, we should probably have a webinar on completely, but I won't go into too much detail. They're just SPF and DKIM. They were authenticating their emails, which obviously built trust by adding a trust mark next to their address in Hotmail and Gmail, which subscribers then trusted and were able to open their email.
All right, thanks, Tom. We appreciate that. A lot of great content, Adam and Tom. We've got here about 5 minutes, and we've got quite a few questions that have come in. But first, before we get to that, I just wanted to remind everyone that you can get the new email marketing handbook at a discounted rate of $100 off with that link right there. So feel free to follow that and be able to save $100 on the new email handbook. Wanted to go ahead and get right into the questions because we've got quite a few. The first question is for Adam. If you're there, how did Olifescript find and fix those bad email addresses you were discussing?
Okay. So for the 4 types of bad email addresses Olifescript identified, they set up a lot of different systems to identify them, remove them, and fix them. And they did some of this work in partnership with another company that kind of specializes in list cleaning. A few things they did include setting up a simple rules system. So any email address that was entered into the database would first have to pass rules, such as, does this address contain an @ symbol? Does this address contain at least a period? And any address that failed to meet those rules was not allowed in the system. They also had a similar approach by creating a bad email list, basically a long list of emails, a long list of addresses that could be mistyped or that the company knew was invalid or were known spam traps, they had this list, and any incoming address would be checked against this list, and if it included any of those elements, it would not be allowed in. They also set up a pretty sophisticated system to correct misspellings. So they had a list of obvious misspellings, such as yahoo.com, maybe the period was misplaced or there were 3 O's instead of 2, and they would correct these, and rather than not allowing the address in, they would correct the address and put it in the database and essentially gain that subscriber instead of losing them. One of the last things they did was to verify mail servers. So if the company received an address from a mail domain, for example, Pepsi.com or something, if it was a domain they were not familiar with, such as Hotmail or Gmail or some of the other more common ones, they would use their system to make sure that that domain could actively send mail, and that helped prevent invalid addresses from getting in their database. So those are some of the things they did.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Tom, we have a question here for you, and it's a good one. It says, how does email engagement affect reputation and complaints?
Yeah, so email engagement, in the filtering decisions the ISPs use is kind of a new thing, right? So there's 2 prominent ones where that's being deployed, and that's Hotmail and Gmail. AOL and Yahoo are kind of experimenting with that too, but it isn't widely, rolled out. So what engagement means is, for marketers, when you think about it, you're looking at things like clicks and opens and conversions. Well, from an ISP's perspective, they're looking at, for engagement, like when did this person log into their account last? Are they opening your emails? Are they reading the emails? How long are they spending on it? Or are they, just deleting your emails without reading it? So they're actually taking those decision factors into determining whether or not to place your email in the inbox, the spam folder, or to block it. So so really the key thing for marketers now, for at least those 2 webmail providers, Hotmail and Gmail, pay attention to your open rates. If people aren't opening your emails anymore, if they become disengaged, that could actually negatively affect your inbox placement rate. So the key is make sure you have a win-back study in place. Make sure that you're, regularly, asking your subscribers if they want to stay on your list. Make sure that you're at least, touching your subscribers, on a quarterly basis as well. So that's kind of the engagement factors that they're looking at, in a nutshell.
Okay, perfect. This question comes from our Sherpa webinar. It's from Steph Blanchard, and it says, Tom, have you noticed difference in deliverability between full HTML emails versus image-only emails, such from Apple or Threadless?
Yeah, so really the key with that for deliverability is that spam filters are looking at, for HTML, is it one big image or is there an appropriate ratio of text to images? So spammers, how they try to bypass, spam filters, back in the early 2000s was they would actually just do one big image, right? Because then there were no words to, look at or analyze anymore. So spam filters then caught on and they said, you know what, we're going to put the kibosh on that. You can no longer, send just one big image through. So that's where the, the ratio of text to HTML comes in. So make sure that, and also that's good because you want to do that because it's optimizing it for when images aren't on by default, right? Because if, like within the webinar providers, those are off. So you want to make sure that those are optimized for that. And then for the text emails, if you're just sending a text only, that may be great. It really depends on, your subscriber base. So a good example would be like TravelZoo. They send out only a text-only newsletter, and they have phenomenal response rates from that. So their response is, why fix something that's not broken? So I don't have any exact numbers for you, but those are kind of the things that you want to keep in mind for deliverability.
That's good. Appreciate that. Hey, Adam, just kind of a follow-up to what you answered earlier about Olifescript. You had mentioned about fixing those bad email addresses. Would a double opt-in process, would that solve that problem?
Well, not necessarily. As Tom mentioned in his great presentation, a double opt-in process, a really high level of permission, and not all companies are comfortable using a double opt-in process, so it wouldn't meet everybody's marketing needs. And also, although requiring a double opt-in would catch fake addresses, it would prevent invalid addresses from getting in the database. It might even catch spam traps, stop them from getting in your database. But people, you can't rely on that solely, because people who mistype your email address and who are trying to subscribe to your newsletter will essentially never receive the newsletter anyway. It would not address the typo problem at all, and they would still not receive your newsletter. So it would help, but not in all cases.
Okay. Okay. And Tom, this last one, as we're getting out of time here, this is from Bronto Grad on the Sherpa webinar hashtag. It says, Tom, do you have any tips for dealing with recent changes from Gmail and Hotmail?
Yes, that's a great question. So, Brad, you're probably talking about things like smart labels, priority inbox, as well as the engagement filtering. Those are all big changes that have happened recently. Really, I would recommend using a recognizable from address, right? Because if your subscribers don't recognize you, they're probably not going to interact with your email. They're not going to open it. Obviously, segment your emails based on activities, based on activity rates. Really pay attention to the opens. ISPs aren't looking at the clicks, but that can still be something that you can look at, when you do your win-back studies. Excuse me. Also, make sure that your subject line is enticing, because if they are being filtered by smart labels or priority inbox, and now you're competing against all these other marketers in there, right? Make sure that your subject line is enticing. So you really want to spend time on, optimizing that, and then also monitor, make sure that you know where your emails are being placed. You can take action on that. So those are kind of a few of those things. And also, if you go to just our return path blog, we have a couple tips on how to deal with things like the other inbox and the Gmail smart labels and things like that should be able to help out.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I appreciate everyone answering the questions. There's a lot we couldn't get to. And just remind you to go ahead and send us your feedback or your questions based on the webinar. We'd love to get with you and answer those questions more intimately. So again, thank you again to all the speakers we had, and we appreciate your time today, and thank you very much.